LiberalViewer presents.
So even though I've made well over 100 Fox News bias videos, very few of them even mention decreasingly popular Fox News quasi-pundit Glenn Beck, because as I explained in my video titled Stephen Colbert Pwns Glenn Beck, Beck is an admitted stand-up comedian, not a journalist, not an expert, and not even really a pundit, so a lot of what he says is just sophistry, character assassination, guilt by association, or some bizarre assertion of belief that defies any fact-checking, like what Beck said last week in his radio show about the recent earthquake in Japan that you can hear in this clip.
I'm not saying God is, causing earthquakes. Well, no, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that either. God, what God does is God's business. I have no idea. But I'll tell you this, whether you call it Gaia or whether you call it Jesus, there's a message being sent, and that is, hey, you know that stuff we're doing? Not really working out real well. Maybe we should stop doing some of it. I'm just saying.
Now, what Glenn Beck was just saying there on his radio show is, again, more a bizarre assertion of belief than anything anyone could fact-check, but Beck did wander into the realm of the factual the next day on his Fox News TV show, which I just happened to be watching when Beck purported to give his viewers a lecture on nuclear reactors, which again was a little hard to take seriously after he began with this caveat.
Let me start with some perspective here on what they say is happening now and give you some perspective, because people hear these words. Do you know what a nuclear rod means when it's exposed? Do you? Because I didn't until yesterday. I have no idea. I don't really do that.
He doesn't really do what? Facts? But of course, Glenn Beck's lack of familiarity with the facts didn't stop him from trying to downplay the worst-case scenario in a nuclear accident, sometimes colorfully called the China Syndrome, which Beck misrepresented as some kind of left-wing propaganda from Jane Fonda land, beginning in this clip.
The China Syndrome, and we can thank Jane Fonda for this one. Oh, in Jane Fonda land, here's what happens. The pellets all sit there, and then they start to melt. But they don't melt. They melt in your mouth, not at the bottom of the reactor, Jane. Doesn't happen. They collect at the bottom of the reactor, and then they plow through the 8 feet of concrete and steel, and they keep going all the way to China.
Now, so far, other than blaming Jane Fonda for the title of a movie in which she acted, Glenn Beck hasn't gotten his facts too wrong, but then he really started getting lost. Kind of like the way you'd get lost and hit Russia and not China if you went north from the Fukushima reactor, as Beck didn't seem to understand in the continuation of that clip here.
Which will be hard because it'd have to go north pretty quickly. I guess this would be not the China Syndrome if this were real. It would be more like the, Norman, Oklahoma Syndrome. It would burn a hole through the earth. Okay, does that sound even reasonable? Nothing like that has ever even happened at the worst nuclear incident in history, Chernobyl. And experts verify not going to happen, it's impossible, it's a movie.
Now, Glenn Beck got it doubly wrong in his explanation there, both in the way he described the meaning of the title of the movie The China Syndrome, and the way he claimed that the China Syndrome couldn't actually happen because even though the China Syndrome was only a movie, the person playing an expert actually did a better job of accurately explaining the meaning of the China Syndrome than Beck did, as you can see in this clip.
Then we came very close to the China Syndrome.
The what?
If the core is exposed, for whatever reason, the fuel heats beyond core heat tolerance in a matter of minutes. Nothing can stop it. And it melts right down through the bottom of the plant, theoretically to China. But of course, as soon as it hits groundwater, it blasts into the atmosphere and sends out clouds of radioactivity. The number of people killed would depend on which way the wind is blowing. Render an area the size of Pennsylvania permanently uninhabitable.
So even in the movie The China Syndrome, the worst-case scenario was accurately explained not as burning a hole through the earth all the way to China, but burning a hole through the bottom of the reactor that hits groundwater and releases large amounts of radioactive steam into the atmosphere. And if you check with actual experts instead of Glenn Beck, you'll find quotes like the one from nuclear physicist Kenneth Bergeron in a March 12th article in Scientific American saying about the crisis in Japan, quote, "If a core melts, it will slump to the bottom of the reactor vessel, probably melt through the reactor vessel onto the containment floor. It's likely to spread as a molten pool like lava to the edge of the steel shell and melt through. That would result in a containment failure in a matter of less than a day," unquote. So Glenn Beck completely misrepresented both the message of the title of the movie The China Syndrome and whether that worst-case scenario was possible when he said,
"It would burn a hole through the earth." Okay, does that sound even reasonable? Nothing like that has ever even happened at the worst nuclear incident in history, Chernobyl. And experts verify not going to happen, it's impossible, it's a movie.
So what do you think? Which more accurately explained the danger from the worst-case scenario at a nuclear reactor? The movie starring Jane Fonda or the TV show starring Glenn Beck? And given the way Glenn Beck is always playing up other, often bogus Armageddon scenarios, why is Glenn Beck downplaying this real worst-case scenario from nuclear power?
YouTube, you decide.